You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. If you have been wondering what is really happening truly with women running for office today, because we've read all about the extraordinary numbers that are supposedly happening, and do they really stand a chance? And is it a flash in the pan? And is it a stable change or just a moment in time? Well, today my guests for an extended interview are the two women who know most of the answers to the questions we have. Ruth Mandel, the founder and first director of CAWP, the Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers, and Debbie Walsh, the current director. And they not only have the answers and the numbers and the figures, but they have even more resources so that if we can't answer in this hour what you're asking, you can find it. But first, we need to go inside the headlines. I'm going to spend precious little time on the latest Trump disasters, from DACA to Davos, from his vicious video accusing Democrats of collaborating with murder committed by mythical illegal immigrants, to the literal carnage at yet another school shooting by a born-here white American boy using a gun in Kentucky, about which Trump was completely silent. I will say that Nancy Pelosi has sure been able to hold her House Democrats' caucus in tighter solidarity than Chuck Schumer has been in the Senate. He's one of my senators, and I'm aware of all the complexities he faces as minority leader, including diminishing political returns on the shutdown, yes. But his messaging was as weak as his spine, and I'm furious at the Dreamers having been betrayed yet again. I will say that hundreds of thousands of us born-here Americans better be ready to shelter, hide, and if necessary be arrested and deported with the DACA kids, should it come to that. But there's lots of other news this week, women-specific, both at home and abroad. So I'm going to lead with the more than 150 women who dared speak at length at the trial of Dr. Lawrence Nassar, who stood accused of decades of sexual molestation, abuse, and outright assault when they were under his care, his medical care, as child gymnasts. Thanks to intrepid women reporters at major media sources, this story made its way into national headlines. And thanks to Ingham County, Michigan Circuit Judge Rose Marie Aquilina. She called the gymnast heroes, sisters, brave women, survivors. And she insisted that no matter how many, every harmed woman who wanted to speak in her courtroom as a witness could. And they did, for days on end. Then the judge sentenced Nassar to, in effect, life in prison. In the wake of these women breaking silence, Lou Anna Simon, president of Michigan State University, where Nassar's practice was based, resigned, as did 3 top officials in USA Gymnastics, Paul Perella, Jay Binder, and Bitsy Kelly. But what about all the others to whom the girls complained again and again over the years and years and years and were ignored? The coaches, the assistant coaches, the athletic trainers, the medical assistants, and the other 14 university officials who were told about Nassar's sexual misconduct in the 2 decades before he was arrested, and the United States Olympic Committee. What changes do they or the NCAA envision to ensure that this devastation of young female bodies and minds and emotions, which will track these girls for the rest of their lives, never ever happens again? We intend to stay on this story once it falls from the headlines and the public's memory, because apologies and resignations are a mockery if the nightmare reality continues. Justice, history shows, comes slowly, if at all. Witness the case of Airman Second Class Helen Grace James, who was targeted and investigated by Air Force officials in 1955 for her sexuality, as part of a massive effort to remove lesbian and gay service members known as the Lavender Scare. Now aged 90, living in California, James filed a federal lawsuit early this month in January against the U.S. Air Force, seeking to upgrade her undesirable discharge to honorable. And this week, the Air Force agreed to change her status to honorable. Not such great news from the subcontinent of Asia, where ancient superstitious religious loyalties still shed blood every single day. In Pakistan, 2 polio vaccinators, a mother-daughter team, respectively 38 and 16 years old, were shot dead in the head by motorcycle-riding assassins who believe that science and vaccines come from the devil. 2 years ago, a suicide bomber near a polio center killed a local official and 13 police officers assigned to guard vaccination teams. The Pakistani Taliban claimed responsibility. The teams persist, and they're mostly women, and they're stunningly brave. And look why. 4 years ago, the nation had 306 confirmed cases of polio paralysis. Last year, Pakistan had only 8. But even the movies upset religious fanatics. A Pakistani film about a rape victim who fights to bring her politically powerful attacker to justice is undergoing tribulations. First, the film, Verna, was banned by the Central Board of Film Censors for edgy content and, quote, maligning state institutions. But a public outcry, plus a social media campaign, as well as strong feminist statements by very popular lead actress Mihira Khan, created enough pressure to release the film. Yet now many movie houses are afraid to show it, since there are riots, rock-throwing, and firebomb attacks wherever it is shown. Right next door, in India, which still calls itself the world's largest democracy, threats of suicide and murder, as well as more riots, have broken out over another film, Padmavat, about a mythical Hindu queen who committed suicide rather than surrender her body and her land to a Muslim ruler. Few people have actually seen the film, but one religious fundamentalist Hindu state-level official actually offered a bounty to behead the lead actress and director. A group of 300 women has actually petitioned the Indian government for the right to kill themselves over the film, and mobs have vandalized movie theaters, toll booths, road dividers, buses, cars, and even attacked a school bus full of kids, pounding it with stones. Well, at least we can close with some relief. Better news. When 37-year-old Jacinda Ardern was elected leader of New Zealand's Labour Party last August, she was asked whether it was acceptable for our nation's Prime Minister to take maternity leave while in office. She fired back, quote, "It is totally unacceptable in 2017 to say that women should have to answer that question in the workplace. Period," close quote. Well, in October, as reported here, Ardern became New Zealand's youngest prime minister in more than a century, and now she has announced that she and her partner, Clark Gayford, he's a host of a TV show about fishing, well, they expect their first child in June. She says, "I am not the first woman to multitask." She followed that statement up with social media posts saying, "I'll be prime minister and the mum, and Clark will be called first man of fishing and stay-at-home dad." Asked whether the couple planned on getting married, he said, "I like the idea that we're doing everything in reverse." Ardern says she will take a 6-week maternity leave and then return to her job, while her partner will be the full-time caregiver. It's time for a short pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I will be right back with my 2 very special guests for this program in an extended interview with Ruth Mandel and Debbie Walsh of the Center for American Women and Politics. You bet.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. And now a little context before my guests. We've been hearing, all of us, about the hordes of women who are thinking of running, and the various women's organizations and electoral organizations that are scrambling to meet the needs and the questions of those women, ranging from the Women's Campaign School at Yale to Higher Heights, founded in 2011, to harness the power of black women as voters and organizers and candidates. And that rise in engagement in the months after Trump's win became an enormous spike with the autumn 2017 elections in Virginia, New Jersey, and Alabama, where black women were really acknowledged as political drivers of change for the first time. And then there's Vote, Run, Lead, which trains female candidates specifically for local and state offices, and says that in a typical year, 2/3 of the organization's resources are devoted to persuading women to run, with the goal of tapping 2,000 nationwide. But this year, 3,200 women have been trained by Vote, Run, Lead, and over 10,000 contacted the group completely unsolicited. And then, of course, there's Emily's List. I've mentioned them before, which nearly tripled the size of its state and local team and doubled the digital staff to handle the 26,000 inquiries they've received about jumping into the electoral fray instead of the usual 900 inquiries they get. And there's Run for Something, co-founded in 2017 by a Hillary for America alumna, to enlist first-time candidates. And they're millennials. They're younger than 35. And they expected around 100 people to sign up for the first year, and instead, wait for it, 15,000 did, and 60% of them are women, 40% non-white, and the group so far boasts a nearly 50% success rate after supporting 72 candidates last fall. And the typical win rate for first-timers is 10%. So, good stuff happening, and there's more groups, but we decided to go to the source, to the mother of them all, the Center for American Women and Politics, founded by Ruth Mandel. It is based at the Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers University in New Jersey. Ruth had been the director and currently is the director of Eagleton Institute of Politics, the Board of Governors of Professor of Science Politics and Senior Scholar Center for American Women and Politics. As a founder and director of the Eagleton Center for COP from 1971, very early, through 94, Ruth built a national center with multifaceted research, education, public service, and information programs about women's political participation. This was a subject previously unexplored. She's also the author of numerous publications about women's changing political roles, including In the Running, The New Woman Candidate, the first book-length account of women's experiences as candidates for political office. The current director of COP, Debbie Walsh, is also with us. Debbie joined the center staff in 1981 and became the director in 2001, and she oversees the huge menu, COP's multifaceted programs that we're going to discuss. She is frequently called upon by the media for information and comment, and she speaks to a variety of audiences across the country on topics related to women's political participation. She also oversees COP's reports, including the latest one, Representation Matters, Women in the U.S. Congress and Finding Gender in Election 2016, Lessons from Presidential Gender Watch. Here, to my great pride and delight, is Ruth Mandel and Debbie Walsh. Ruth Mandel and Debbie Walsh, wonderful women, welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm so pleased to have you here.
Thanks so much for having us, Robin. It's an honor to be on your show.
Ruth, you made COP happen, Center for American Women in Politics. You were the founder and the first director. Debbie, you are the current director. And COP is just it is the go-to place. I mean, it is the leading source of scholarly research and current data about American women's political participation. And it also promotes greater knowledge and understanding about that. And before you existed, there was simply no organization and there was no educational institution that compiled information about women in government and politics. So thank you for all these years since 1971. And now it seems history is catching up with herstory and with you. So tell us, just remember to identify yourself so we know who's talking. Tell us about this amazing current moment where to date more women are planning to run for office than any point in American history.
So this is Ruth. We're going to let Debbie answer that very specifically and in some detail. But I want to pick up just on that wonderful introduction to say that when this opened, when the Center for American Women and Politics opened in 1971, not only were we kind of a laughing stock on campus and not taken seriously here, but the subject, and not taken seriously because there wasn't a subject called Women and Politics to study, and we were accused of being advocates and not real scholars and so forth. So we take credit for creating the subject in a way on campus. But my point is that when we did the first census of women holding office, because we wanted to know who was out there in 1971, across the board, whether local office, middle level office, state office, national office, women were below 5% of all elected officials. I'm saying this because I want to point out that now, 45 plus years later, women are about 25%. We'll leave the presidency out of this for the moment.
Yeah.
Women are about 25%. That sounds like progress, but it also sounds like crawling. And we have, 40. So I was reminded that it took 72 years to get the vote, right? Well, it feels like it's now 170 years from that moment.
Yep.
In getting the vote, and from 1848, from the convention, Women's Rights Convention. It's 170 years, and now we may be at the moment we've all been waiting for and talking about and analyzing why that is and what it's about is just going to keep us very busy for a long time to come. So I'm going to let Debbie tell you something about where it is now.
Okay. That was inspiring. that got my blood boiling. Go for it, Debbie.
Good. So this is Debbie. And I want to add to sort of Ruth's history piece there, which is it's been 100 years since the first woman, had over 100 years since the first woman was elected to Congress, and we're only at 104 women, 105 now, actually, with the new woman in the Senate. But again, it is that slow progress that, it sounds, I remember when everyone was celebrating that we hit 100 women in Congress, and I thought, really? Only 100 women in Congress at this point?
Yep.
Not good enough. So. Yep. So this is a moment. We are at a moment, and we're seeing the biggest surge we've ever seen in any one election cycle in terms of potential candidates. So right now for the United States Senate, we have 49 women who we consider to be likely candidates for the Senate, 389 women who are likely candidates for the U.S. House, 79 for governor. And just to give you a sense, this is about double the number of women who were running 2 years ago for the U.S. House. That is the place where we're seeing the most growth. But we are set to set records at all levels this time around for the number of women filing for each of these levels. I will tell you that overwhelmingly, particularly in the House, these women are running as challengers, as opposed to running for open seats. But in this particular year, when we have seen what we saw, first of all, with the election of Donald Trump, kind of busting out of all conventional wisdom, and then what we saw in Virginia and in Alabama, I think a lot of our sense of what the conventional wisdom is a bit upside down. And so unlike other years where I would have been very much just being so cautious and saying, yes, but 2/3 of these women are running as challengers. I'm not sure we're going to see the change.
Right.
I don't know. This time around, I think, we could really see a wave here coming out of those women who are running as challengers.
Yes.
Ruth here, just to say that lives with us, the fact that several times over the past 45 years, we've had lots of calls and lots of inquiries about, what do we want to say about this is the year of the woman. This
Right.
is the year of the woman in politics. So we're a little bit war weary from that.
Right.
And yet everyone here does feel this as different. And let me just say what is obvious, and we've seen a couple of pieces being written up recently. A lot of it has happened. Part of it that's very important has happened because of a defeat.
Yes.
And because the most important woman in our time in women's political history, Hillary Rodham Clinton, lost that race for president.
Exactly. And I want to just share with you your feeling chary about making, positive predictions, because with the first Women's March, everybody was over the moon. I certainly was, largest in the history of the country, largest in the history of the world. But being an old organizer, I was very nervous, because we all know that sustaining that energy is where the, rubber meets the road, is what I keep saying. And I was afraid people would go home and think, okay, I've marched, done that. But they haven't. The energy at the grassroots, and in particular, obviously, among women, now fed further by the Me Too movement, has been incredible. And I am now beginning to actually believe, particularly when you look at the breakdown. We know that it was largely African American women who pulled off Alabama, and if you look at the one breakdown I've read, maybe this is out of date by 15 minutes now, in terms of the House, of the 390 or 89 women planning to run, 22 of them are non-incumbent black women. And for scale, there's only 18 black women in the House currently. So,
Right.
that also tells you, so this just incredible movement. And what I love about these, Ruth and Debbie, is that they're newbies and they're coming for a variety. Some of them, you will have more of this, of course, than I do, but it seems some of them are there because of healthcare destruction. Some of them are there over what is called restorative justice for, sexual harassment and abuse. Some of them are just pissed off. They've had enough. And they realize, I've always thought I'm not qualified, but these men don't know what they're doing either. So I can do as well as that. So the variety of reasons that they're pouring in, is that what you're finding as well?
Yeah, and I think I shared some of the same. Oh, this is Debbie. Sorry.
Good.
I share some of the same feelings that you had after the last march, which was, it was very energizing, but what was going to come next? And I think in many cases, Donald Trump has been the gift that keeps on giving when it comes to organizing, right? Because every week there is something that enrages these women, and they go out, and one of the solutions is to run for office. And I think that's what we're seeing out there right now, and that's really making a difference. Ruth here, Robin, I just want to comment on your, the feeling that this is what they're thinking is, I could do it as well as that. The last time that happened, not at this level, certainly not with this intensity. Nonetheless, it was during the ERA campaign when women, for the first time, especially led by Now, started to go around to legislatures to try to push the ERA through. Right. And what we kept hearing was, oh my God, I went there and I saw what those people were doing. Yes. They were men, and I looked at what they were doing, and I could do it as well as that. And they decided to run for the legislature.
Right, exactly.
And I think in some ways, I think this is Debbie. I think in some ways, Donald Trump has lowered the qualification bar. I think that one of the things that women saw in the 2016 election was, look, there was this extraordinarily qualified woman, right? Probably the most qualified person ever to run for president of the United States. And she loses to somebody who, by all accounts, is the most unqualified person to ever hold that office. And then they started to think, well, why am I waiting around? I'm going to just do it. I think this is going to shift some of the research findings that we've had over the years.
Sure.
You know, one of the things that we've found is that women are much more likely than men to run for office when they get recruited. But I think if you look at this crop of candidates, this is a different story that we're seeing. These women did not wait around for their party or a party leader to come to them and to say, you should run for office.
Right.
They came to it themselves, or frankly, it was another woman that went on the march with them that said, you know what, I'm not going to run, but you should run, and they're doing it.
Well, we've had obstacles, and they're formidable obstacles, from fundraising to non-recruitment. I mean, we all know what they are. For decades, and in moving the enormous numbers and power of the women's movement in this country, in moving it to the polls, and now it's moving. I mean, what is incredible. And also, I hope you address this, because there is a lot of movement on state and local legislatures, on mayoral races, on local governing bodies around the country, which the right wing has paid attention to, I think, more than progressives, and which women seem to be pouring into running on. I mean, and not everybody realizes the crucial importance of that, because it's local governing bodies around the country that in recent times passed legislation on paid sick days and paid leave and higher minimum wages, and a lot of local policies, including sanctuary cities, including environment, that those exercise power as well as being stepping stones and experience toward national office. So it's very heartening to me that women are pouring into those as well. You're finding that as well, I take it.
Well, there is no data out there to tell us the numbers of women who are running at the municipal level. There's lots of anecdotal evidence, but no data. And we will have data after the primaries for the state legislative races. So we'll have a sense of where this year fits in, but there is nothing going on out there that would lead me to think that what we're seeing at the national level in terms of the federal legislature and governors is going to be different at the state legislative level. Everything would point to more women running, being engaged, being involved, and trying to find ways in which they can have an impact on policy and the way government is working.
Right.
And let me say, this is Ruth, let me say that some of the irony, Robin, over all the years, running for elective office, starting back in the 70s and going forward, was not the first and foremost objective of many of us. Many feminists, many people in the movement.
Of course.
It was difficult. It was on campuses and in the movement, it was difficult. And now what's happened is that this idea has been embraced almost universally, moving multiple different kinds of constituencies and perspectives, that is, among women, in the direction of elective office. I mean, I hate to use this word, but elective office has become sexy, right? And
I love it. It's time. It's really time.
We didn't care about it. The standard answer we used to get was, politics, that's dirty. I don't want to participate in that. I mean, Emma Goldman always said, why would I want to help my friend run for mayor? Because I don't want anybody who's my friend to be in elective office. Right. And that really dogged us for a long time.
I know.
And it's turning around now.
I'm so glad.
This is Debbie, the slogan for the Women's March. Marching to the polls, right?
That's right.
The focus is on electoral politics.
And the interesting thing to me is that although, of course, you collect data on women running in any party, in both parties, on women in politics, period. And although there are one or two groups encouraging conservative women and Republican women to win, the great, enormous energy surge that we're talking about is coming from progressive women, isn't it?
Well, it's on the Democratic side. There's no question about that. So if you look at right now, that group that I was talking about, 389 who are likely candidates for the House,
right?
314 of them are Democrats.
Wow.
So the energy, the passion, the enthusiasm is coming on the Democratic side. Now, that said, I would contend that we are never getting to political parity on the back of one political party, that the Republican Party has to do better when it comes to get recruiting, supporting, and electing women to office. So right now, if you look at Congress, almost a third of the Democratic caucus is made up of women,
right,
where on the Republican side, only about 10% of the Republicans in Congress are women.
right.
And that doesn't serve any of us, and it frankly doesn't serve the policy agenda that women care about, because we just did some really important research on the impact of women in Congress, and we interviewed almost all of the women who served in the 114th Congress, Democrats and Republicans. And the Republicans and the Democrats told us that they wanted to see more Republican women in Congress.
Well,
those Democratic women wanted to have those voices on the other side of the aisle, partially because they thought that on some things they could work with them in different kinds of ways than they can with their male colleagues.
And some of the power and the leadership right now, ironically, in the Senate is in the hands of women. It's in the hands of Republican women, Susan Collins and Murkowski.
Right, but they're going to have to, the Republican women across the country are going to have to rattle their chains more noisily and demand that there be support specifically for women in their own party, so that we can preserve what is left of a two-party system. But I find
whatever.
I mean,
the Republican Party will be.
Yeah, because I mean, the boys they're having to deal with seem to think that the problem is all in messaging, and they don't seem to get it that they have anti-woman policies, and so that makes it hard for their own women.
Yeah, this is Debbie, and you saw it when Mitch McConnell put together that group to look at healthcare and overhauling healthcare. And he couldn't bring himself to put one of the Republican women who serve in the Senate on that committee.
Yeah.
And, that is
amazing.
Self-defeating. And it defeated him in the end because, look, had he incorporated Susan Collins into that process or Lisa Murkowski, he might have gotten more of what he wanted, but that's not how it works.
No, that's not how it works. It's more important to strut about like a peacock. So, this is just incredible. Listen, take a moment, of the time we have left and talk about, some of the specific co-op programs, because when we're off the air, I want people who may have been on Mars and don't know about Center for American Women in Politics to be able to go to your website, and find out about Ready to Run and find out about New Leadership and Teach a Girl to Lead. So give us a few sentences on each.
Sure. So Ready to Run is our nonpartisan campaign training program for women. We hold that here in New Jersey for New Jersey women, but we have partnerships with colleges and universities around the country, and they run their own state-based campaign training programs. And we believe strongly in the idea that these have to be state-based, because the way you run a campaign and the way you do politics in New Jersey is very different than Iowa or Utah or Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to have ownership of these programs because we want to build sites of women's political leadership in these states. In the same vein, we have a program called New Leadership, which stands for National Education for Women's Leadership, which is a program for college women to demystify the political process and open up the idea of having a career in politics, whether it's being an advocate, working in government, working for an elected official, or eventually running for office yourself. And in the same way that we do the program for the students here in New Jersey, we have partnerships in about 25 states around the country now that are running those programs. More than 1,000 college women have gone through this program, and it's really opened their eyes to the possibilities of politics in their future. I would also say that for the women who are listening to this program, we have a resource on our website that lists the kinds of programs and educational opportunities and resources that are available for women in every state if they are interested in becoming more engaged in politics. It's a resource map that you can click on your state and find PACs for women, campaign training programs for women, campaign training programs for women and men, different programs that the two political parties are running, really all kinds of opportunities that are out there, because there are a lot of projects, programs, PACs that are out in every state, but they're underutilized because people just don't know they're there. So I urge folks to go there and find out ways in which they can get more involved. And then finally, our Teach a Girl to Lead program is to try to make women's public leadership visible to kids, girls and boys,
mostly K through 12. And again, there's some great resources on the website. If you have, this is really a website for the adults in children's lives so that they can bring these resources to them. So education programs, films, books that focus on women's public leadership. And we run a project every year to try to get women state legislators into classrooms by reading a book about women in politics to kids in K through about third or fourth grade. So we're trying to get them as early as we can and keep at them all through their lives to get them more engaged and involved.
You know, I know that you're working on this 24/7, and so you're probably too close to it to realize how amazing you are and COP is, because you mean you're going into the little girl who has never thought about maybe she'll run for president of her class. How about that? And then seeing it straight on up through the college woman who's thinking, well, that's possibly a career. I never occurred to me before. And then when she's ready to run, you're ready to run with her. I mean, this is amazing. There are other groups, and I've mentioned them on this program and continue to, but COP is really, you were out there first and you still are out ahead of the pack. And I am personally so grateful to you. I mean, to have, Susan B. Anthony said, hoard your vote. And nobody listened to her on that. It was hard enough getting the damn thing, let alone hoarding it and voting as a block. But this is different, because when you can see it, you can begin to think you can be it. And that's what you've made possible. So please go to Center for American Women in Politics, CAWP, COP, which is a unit of the Eagleton Institute for Politics at Rutgers, and find your way into running. I know that some women who are running ran because they'd always been feminists and they'd always been activists, but they just never thought of electoral office. And so they'd raise their kids. And I know 3 different women whose kids, grown kids, and one just a teenager, turned to her and turned to the mother and said, well, then why aren't you running? And so she did.
Good.
So this is
great.
This
That's
is
a great story, Robin. Thank you for those kind words.
Oh, my God. Thank you for everything that you've been done and are doing, and onward toward an amazing year.
Onward, yes.
And I hope we'll have you back later on this year so we can talk about some extraordinary results at the polls. Wouldn't that be great?
Terrific.
Thank you both, and thanks for being with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Thanks for what you're doing.
We have to take a break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, but coming right up is the Surrealism Corner, so don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back and ready for the Surrealism Corner. I'm sure you've heard of the various lawsuits challenging partisan gerrymandering across the country, which, quote, clearly, plainly, and palpably, close quote, violate the Constitution. Those 3 words, in fact, were used by the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court last week in adding to a string of court decisions elsewhere that have been striking down political maps unduly favoring one political party, the Republican Party. For example, the Wisconsin State Assembly District and North Carolina's entire congressional map. The Pennsylvania court banned the current map of the state's 18th House District in Pennsylvania from being used in this year's primary and general elections and ordered new maps to be submitted to the court by February 15th. But the state's Republican-dominated legislature, which approved the current map in the first place, is going to be fighting it through the federal court system. Now, basically, that's just to stall as many elections as possible, since state law is generally beyond the reach of federal judges. As now drawn, Republicans control 13 of 18 Pennsylvania House seats, despite the fact that a majority of voters in the state are registered Democratic. And despite the fact that some congressional districts are mapped in Pennsylvania in such twisted and bizarre shapes that one is commonly described as looking like Goofy kicking Donald Duck. Now, I'm putting this item in the surrealism corner because it's so far over the top. And also, I need to do a little flashback rave over it. Pennsylvania, it was said, was a sure thing for Hillary. But it turns out that leveling the playing field in this supposedly blue or purple state had been as skewed deliberately as a ski slope. And it got me thinking about how staggeringly, stunningly much this woman had thrown at her. A policy wonk not particularly good or happy at superficial backslapping to begin with, which is a virtue, not a fault in my book, she overcame her own so-called stylistic failings. But she couldn't ever overcome the bad advice of Mark Penn, old-style centrist party man who packaged her as an imitation man himself. Nor Bill, being Bill, chewing the fat spontaneously with Loretta Lynch. Thank you very much, Bill. There was new technology, and there was hacking the likes of which no one had ever seen or imagined before. There was alleged rapist and megalomaniac Julian Assange, who said out loud he wanted to destroy her, and he said that even before everybody finally was onto him as being a rapist and a megalomaniac. There was real fake news spewing out of Planet Murdoch and Fox, and there were hidden campaign monies from Ukraine and Russia. And there were the bots and the trolls and the armies of professional cyber criminals employed by the Trumpians and the Russians. There were voter suppression measures across the South and in some northern states as well. There was the archaic electoral college, which these days means cows in the Midwest sort of equal voters on both coasts. And now we learn that there was shockingly effective and widespread gerrymandering, carefully laid down by the GOP operatives in each state well ahead of the elections. They threw everything at her. And you know what? She still won by 3 million votes. Utterly surreal. And here's a surreal offering from one of the border states, border in the Civil War, that is, not national geography. Kentucky, the state represented by superb bourbon and by two of my least favorite senators, Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell. Well, if you're on Medicaid in Kentucky and you get kicked off the rolls for being unable to meet the state's expensive, punishing, and cruel new work requirements, guess what? Kentucky now will be offering a novel way to reactivate your medical coverage, a health or financial literacy course that you have to pass. The new state Medicaid program hasn't worked out all the details yet, but the course contents will probably include instruction on household budgeting, opening a checking account, weight management, and chronic disease management. Health policy experts are very alarmed. For one thing, although Medicaid is supposed to serve poor people, many Americans, not just those who seek Medicaid, struggle with health and financial literacy. Also, states have a very bad reputation of applying such requirements selectively and arbitrarily, and such tests evoke those used in American history to impede voter registration of Black Americans in the Jim Crow South. Besides, this has a deliberately stigmatizing effect, a sort of blame the victim, it's your own fault if you're poor and ignorant and uneducated and dying of a disease that you're supposed to know that you have before being able to get diagnosed to find out what the disease you have is. In reality, only a small minority, even of the privately insured, have a proficient level of health literacy. Research has found that providing financial literacy education in school settings is effective, and also during teachable moments when individuals are making financial decisions, but neither of those approaches are used in the surreal Kentucky program. Only humans would do this kind of thing to their own. Animals do not generally attack their own species. Many creatures, in fact, care for their own assiduously, including insects. So here's a story that both alarms and comforts. Last year, headlines shot round the world about insect Armageddon. Turns out the insect population has been declining by more than 75% over the last 3 decades, which explains why, if you drive, you no longer need to clean bugs from the windshields. Now, the source of the news was the obscure, volunteer-run Entomological Society Krefeld, Krefeld, in Germany. It's a group composed of biology PhDs, chemists, electrical engineers, a school teacher, a physicist, and children. But they have been doing groundbreaking research for some time, and it's finally been published by Dave Goulson of the University of Sussex, who is himself a bee expert. I suspect that some of you have zoned out during this item, since many people have a thing about bugs, who after all do get a bad press and comparatively little interest scientifically. But they are estimated to make up more than half of all animal life on our planet, and only about 10% of insect species are even thought to have been named. So raw data is hard to come by, which is where the German hobbyists come in. And their alarm rings true with scientists in the field of entomology because it fits perfectly with what we already know about the growing disappearance of insect-eating birds. If anyone can save this form of life on the planet, it's people like that. And I suppose it's reassuringly surreal that when a reporter asked the group's wasp expert whether at this rate all insects were going to disappear, the answer was, "Oh, don't worry. All vertebrates will die before that." It's time for one last break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be back in just a moment with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again with some fighting words. Wondering at the cognitive dissonance that permits the religious right to cheerfully tolerate Trump's porn stars, his lies, and his bigotries? Well, recently an important op-ed piece in the New York Times cleared my sinuses and made me sit up straighter. It deserves even more attention. It was written by Catherine Stewart, author of The Good News Club, the Christian Right Stealth Assault on America's Children. And it sent me off in search of still more information to even further buttress Stewart's clearly strong facts. She was writing about the Museum of the Bible, which has planted its flag at the corner of 4th and D Street in Washington, D.C., a few blocks southwest of the U.S. Capitol. She was also writing about Revolution 2017, a recent gathering at the museum of those bent on transforming nations, as they put it, by igniting a holy reformation in every sphere of society. The museum sees its task as a long-term campaign to embed certain assumptions in the landscape of our government. For instance, last autumn, Ralph Drollinger, founder and president of Capital Ministries and a highly influential evangelical, held a training conference for 80 international associates at the museum on the topic of creating and sustaining discipleship ministries to political leaders. Drollinger believes that social welfare programs have no basis in Scripture, that Christians in government have an obligation to hire only Christians, and that women should not be allowed to teach grown men. It's quite clear in his book, Rebuilding America, The Biblical Blueprint. He also believes that the state should and must be an avenger of wrath, and its God-given responsibility is to moralize a fallen world through the use of force. He was an early and passionate supporter of Trump. Fringe views without much impact, you think? Well, Drollinger communicates these views in weekly Bible study groups, not just to any old believers, but to certain select folks. Do sit down. The participants in his groups include Mike Pompeo, the director of the CIA, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, Betsy DeVos, Secretary of Education, an outhouse full of other senior officials in the Trump administration, and the Vice President, Mike Pence. Their teacher-pastor plans to institute similar groups in all 50 U.S. state capitals and also claims to have planted 24 operations overseas, as well as hoping to create 200 ministries in 200 foreign federal capitals. His group was invited to start just such a study ministry in Belarus in 2015, and his wife Danielle, who attended as a representative of the museum, promised the attendees that the museum's Bible curriculum will soon be translated into Russian. If the plan seems like a blueprint for turning Meg Atwood's A Handmaid's Tale from fiction into fact, well, understand that none of this is accidental. Steve Green, the museum's founder, is also, you sure you're sitting down? The president of the Hobby Lobby craft store chain. He became an ultra-right-wing hero thanks to the conservative majority on the Supreme Court, which gifted Hobby Lobby with the unconstitutional right to withhold federally mandated reproductive health care coverage from its female employees. But Hobby Lobby isn't the museum's sole supporter. The donor wall honors a dozen or more foundations from the ultra-right Christian community, including lots of Amway money and numerous DeVos family foundations. Cindy Jacobs, a leading figure of charismatic Christianity, describes the museum as, quote, God's base camp. And she predicts that, quote, Trump will be seated and mantled with the power of God. Now, perhaps your brain, frantically trying to steer out of having braked and skidded into a spin on the verge of a flip-over, is trying to reassure your pounding heart that this well-bankrolled, carefully thought-through strategy is nevertheless incapable of corrupting the multiple layers of government and law that our framers deliberately laid down as secular. Well, in case that's what your brain is doing, steer faster. Gretchen Borchelt of the National Women's Law Center has already sounded more than one alarm, saying this administration is focused on recognizing one set of religious beliefs. It's going to do whatever it can to violate or reshape the law to do that. Well, example. Roger Severino, a religious right anti-abortion lawyer who now runs the Office of Civil Rights, this month laid out new protections allowing health care workers with religious or moral objections to abortion to opt out on this federally legal procedure. Deanna Wallace of Americans United for Life, an anti-abortion religious group, has said, "It's so encouraging to have the Department of Health and Human Services on our side this time." In fact, Charmaine Yost, former head of Americans United for Life, is now the top spokesperson at the Department of Health and Human Services, and she steers the agency's messaging. Matthew Bowman is now HHS Deputy General Counsel, where he's helping roll back the same birth control protections he once fought against before the Supreme Court. Valerie Huber, a leading advocate for sex abstinence education, is an emerging power in overseeing the HHS Title X program, which includes funding contraception care. And HHS has created a brand new Conscience and Religious Freedom Division of its Civil Rights Office, which will work with Jeff Sessions' Justice Department to strengthen health workers' ability to opt out of procedures they oppose. Meanwhile, over at the Department of Homeland Security, Frank Wuko, senior advisor with a direct line to the White House, and the executive director of DHS's Executive Order Task Force, that's the task force organized to implement Trump's Muslim travel ban, well, this powerful guy has a foul history of having said things like, all gay people are faggots, Obama was not born in the U.S., and Muslims want to subjugate and humiliate all Christians. I could go on U.S. government agency after agency, but I want you to steer out of that skid safely rather than intentionally crashing yourself into the nearest brick wall. Instead, Check out the current struggle against the terrifyingly wealthy and well-organized religious extremist ethno-nationalist right by visiting the website of the Freedom from Religion Foundation and other such groups committed to retaining and strengthening the separation between church and state. Washington, Jefferson, and Madison, were they alive, would all be proud to become members and supporters of such groups. And if you're feeling strong enough to see for yourself, next time you're in Washington, D.C., look in at the museum and maybe leave some kind of message in the guest book. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter and be sure to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and at iTunes, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. And you can check out my website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.